We're so excited to have you all on this call to talk about how we can really make as much noise as possible and confirm as many judges as possible between now and the end of the year. My name is Meg Simons. I'm going to be your kind of tour guide for the training today. I'm here with People for the American Way. I'm so excited to have all these amazing folks on the call with me. These folks have been working in the judicial nomination space for decades. If you put all their experience together, they're some of the smartest people I know, and I'm so excited they're here to talk to you today. So I'm going to kick it off to my organization's president, Savante Myrick, to talk to you a little bit about why this work matters and why we're so excited to do it now. Savante?
Sure. Thank you so much, Meg, and thank you for so expertly setting up this meeting, as always. My name is Savante. If we haven't met before, I've been president of People for the American Way for the last year and a half. Before that, I was, and I hope you'll excuse the term, a politician. I ran for office with city council when I was a junior at Cornell, and for mayor at 24. I served 14 years in total, and loved almost every second of it. I came here to People for the American Way because I believe that everything we work for was in danger. I still believe it's all in danger. That the right, particularly the right to vote, is the right that precedes all others. We can lose everything if we lose our democracy. You, if you're on this call, probably agree with that. So I'm not going to waste your time like previewing. In fact, I only just now learned what circuit New York is in, right? So I'm not going to pretend to know more than the folks you're about to hear from. I do just want to give you a little bit of the politician's perspective on this, if I could. Why is this difficult? I mean, we know, right? Everybody on this call knows that confirming more judges than the last person is really important because that's how you shift the entire makeup of the federal judiciary. We know that if you allow the makeup to shift too far off balance and off kilter, there's going to be more and more opportunities to do this district shopping, which will allow more radical decisions to make their way to the Supreme Court, which, as we now know, has the least amount of trust and integrity. Anyway, we all know that. So too do the senators. So too does the administration. So why do they even need to hear from us? This is the politician's perspective. They know this. And yet, too often in our public life and our democracy, the incentives aren't quite fully lined up. The benefits of working overtime to fill as many vacancies as possible will be felt for generations. But our elected officials are not elected or re-elected on a generational basis. They have to run every 2, 4, or 6 years. And so what we need is, so the senators, God love them, will sometimes get distracted. We need to vote on this other bill. I know we'd like to do the judges, but I need to do this before I go home because I have to tell the people back home I did this. What we need to do, the reason we're here, is so that we can help realign those incentives. We can help make sure that the administration and the senators know that it's really, really important for them and to us that they do the right thing generationally, even in the short term. Does that make sense? I hope everybody picks up what I'm putting down. The reason we need to hold these trainings, the reason we need to get organized is not because the administration doesn't know it's important. It's because they need to be reminded that this should be a top priority. The people on this call can do it, and the folks you're going to hear from are going to teach us how. So I want to thank you all for being here, and thank you again, Meg, for organizing such a great training.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Savante, for kicking us off. And now I want to turn it to my friend Patrick from the Leadership Conference on Civil and Human Rights. So it is no secret that judicial confirmations can be a weird process. It's not exactly something they teach us in school. They should, but they don't. And so even getting into this work can sometimes feel kind of scary because there's a lot going on. So Patrick, can you tell us how this process works? Like how do you go from like lawyer in New York fighting for civil rights to judge on the First Circuit, Second Circuit? How does that happen?
Well, thanks, Meg, and hi, everyone. As Meg said, I'm Patrick McNeil, he, him. and I am a longtime member of the Fair Courts team at the Leadership Conference on Civil and Human Rights. I'm really excited to be here to do sort of a quick 101, as Meg said, on the nomination and confirmation process, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with. So I'll be really fast. And I love the example Meg just gave of a civil rights lawyer ascending to the federal bench, which thankfully we've seen a lot of that during the Biden administration. So for the purposes of this training and for our work at the federal level, at least, we're mainly talking about lifetime federal judges who sit on the courts established by Article 3 of the US Constitution. So this consists of the US Supreme Court, 13 federal appellate courts known as the circuit courts, and 94 trial courts, which we usually call the district courts. And the process really starts with the announcement of a judicial vacancy, which is most often created when a judge retires or passes away. It can also happen as the result of an impeachment of a judge, but that is super rare. When there is a vacancy, senators from the relevant state make recommendations to the White House in terms of who to nominate, and then negotiations on the nomination are made. The White House counsel and the Department of Justice review the records and background information of the frontrunners, and then the president publicly makes a nomination. You'll see these nominations announced in press releases from the White House, and they usually announce several at a time. And soon after that announcement, the nominations are formally submitted over to the Senate. The nominees fill out a Senate Judiciary Committee questionnaire, and then the Judiciary Committee holds a public hearing on the nomination to ask questions of the nominee. And then subsequently, senators are given an additional opportunity to ask written questions with what are known as questions for the record, or QFers. In the weeks following the hearing, the committee holds an executive business meeting, also known as a markup, to vote on the nomination, where they can vote favorably, unfavorably, or without recommendation. Once a nominee advances to the Senate floor, there's almost always a procedural vote called a cloture vote to end debate on the nomination before the final confirmation vote takes place. These are just simple majority votes to either confirm or reject the nomination. So I think most important to remember, especially during a year like this when so much is at stake, is that the president nominates every lifetime judicial nominee. Every senator votes on whether to confirm or reject every judicial nominee. And additionally, every member of Congress in both the House and the Senate participates in important policy debates and conversations about, and ultimately votes on legislation related to judicial ethics and other efforts to modernize our judiciary. So everyone really does have a role to play, and the people in these seats of power really do matter. So whether at the ballot box or in our advocacy efforts as people who care deeply about our democracy and the protection of our civil and human rights, we all have a number of opportunities to weigh in and make a difference. That was just a quick and sort of oversimplified summary of the process, obviously, but the Leadership Conference is happy to share follow-up materials after today's hearing to ensure you all have this info in one place. So what does the rest of this year look like? Who are these judges we're pushing to confirm, and why do they matter? And how can you all take action throughout the nomination and confirmation process to influence who serves on our federal bench for life? That is what we'll be discussing during today's training. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Meg.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Patrick. And I wanted to highlight, I know that sounds like a lot of steps, but Leadership Conference has a really, really cool chart that I love. It's specifically around the Supreme Court nomination process, but the nomination processes are pretty much the same once you get to the kind of like a vacancy announced, like a name is announced step. So I'm going to drop that in the chat. And I also want to flag that we will be following up. We have something called the Fair Courts Toolkit, which is a toolkit that we, as all the organizations on this call and organizations in kind of this working group we have that we all work together on just nominations, have put together to really make sure we're getting all of this kind of like brain trust information in one place. So we're going to post this training and all of the follow-up resources in that toolkit after this. So we'll send out an email with all of that information so that you have it afterwards. So if you can't copy things from the training or you miss a link, don't worry about it. We'll make sure you get everything. All right. So we have talked about the process, and so this process happens for every judge, right? And we have to manage with like the Senate calendar, and we have to like make sure things are happening. And it's also an election year, which means who knows where senators are at any given time. Some of them are campaigning, some of them are not. It's kind of a mess. So that's why I want to bring on my colleague Mike from Alliance for Justice to talk about what the timeline of the rest of the year looks like and where we can get involved in this process. So Mike, you want to take it away?
Yes, can you hear me okay? Awesome. Hello, everyone. My name is Mike Solomon, he, him pronouns, Deputy Director of Outreach and Membership for the Alliance for Justice. Really excited to be with you all today and great to see so many people on the call. So as Meg said, I'm just going to briefly talk about why now? Why is this a pressing issue for us to be discussing at this point in time? So as you may be aware, we are right now in the August recess for Congress. So this is a period where Congress is not holding votes. They are not holding hearings. The majority of legislators are now home in their districts. So it is kind of a point where not much gets done, or actually almost nothing gets done in Congress. And you may have heard that there's also an election coming up in a few months. So we are currently in a time where nothing is happening now, and we're coming up against a big deadline. So that puts us in a time crunch. If you look at the congressional calendar, there are only 3 weeks of working days remaining for the Senate between now and the election. And all 3 of those weeks fall within the month of September. We also have the lame duck period, which is that stretch between election day and the swearing in of the new Congress in January, but it can be much harder to get things done during the lame duck. So really, there are 3 weeks of working days remaining for this current Senate. And there are many, many open district court seats and circuit court seats and dozens of highly qualified nominees who are pending that need to be confirmed through the process that was just described by Patrick. And in addition to all of those pending nominees, there are many other things that the Senate needs to do, all the other things on their agenda. So right now it's a time crunch. There's many things pulling at them and only a finite amount of time to work with. So it's about prioritization. It's about making sure that the people in leadership who set the agenda for what gets a vote on a particular day are prioritizing floor time for confirmation votes, despite all the other many important things that are knocking at their door and asking for time to be set aside. So the senators, as I said, are home for the most part right now during this August recess. And what they're doing during this time is they're listening to constituents. They're trying to hear what people back home are caring about. And that's heightened even more so this year because, as I mentioned, it's an election year. And a lot of those senators are on the ballot themselves. So they want to know, what are voters caring about? What are they paying attention to? What are the things that are going to resonate back home? And they need to know, when it comes to judicial nominations, that this is something that their voters actually care about and are paying attention to. They need to hear that there is going to be a benefit to them and to the people in their home state by making the case that this needs to be prioritized. So they need to hear that not from people here in DC, but from the people in their home states who actually determine whether or not they keep their jobs. So that is really the moment that we are in right now, why we need to take advantage of this August recess, and we need to lay this groundwork and do this outreach in advance of the short working period that remains, so that when they come back, they know that this is a priority for them. And, we know it will be easiest for the more bipartisan nominees. And that, frankly, leaves a risk of some of the most outstanding individuals who may court a little bit more resistance from some senators, but they really do bring the most to the table. It's going to be the hardest to get folks like that scheduled for a vote. So they are some of the highest priorities for the folks in this coalition. And it makes it really even more important that we continue to consistently message to the senators why this is something we need to focus on, so those outstanding nominees don't get left behind and they can get confirmed during the limited amount of time that the Senate has left to work on it. So that's my spiel on the timing. Thanks very much, everyone, again, for being here, and I'll throw it back to you, Meg.
Absolutely. And I want to flag, so one of the questions we got in the chat was about state courts. And we are going to mostly talk about federal courts on this call, but I want to flag that AFJ, Alliance for Justice, does a lot of amazing work on state courts and also has a lot of amazing resources on the nominees that are up right now. So I'm going to drop a link in the chat so you can check out their website. That's the state courts page, but if you click around, you can also find all of their federal courts work. So I just wanted to shout out that amazing work that they do before we move on to our next speaker. So thank you so much, Mike. And now I'm super excited because we've talked a lot about the process right now, but we haven't talked a lot about the judges themselves. So I want to bring in Angel from the National Women's Law Center to talk to us about the kind of judges that we want on the bench. What is kind of the difference between the judges we saw in the last administration and the judges we're putting on the bench in this administration, and why it's important for our communities that we do this work. So Angel, you want to take it away?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Thanks, Meg. Very happy to be here. I'd like to just offer a couple of quick thoughts. And this has been mentioned by a couple folks already, but like there's a lot of uncertainty right now. I mean, literally like the external environment today is different than it was yesterday. And there's a lot of uncertainty about what's going to happen in just 3 months. And the issues that are really that folks care about, from democracy, abortion, climate, immigration, like, you name it. We don't know what's going to happen and we can't control most of it. But we do have an incredible opportunity right now this year to make a big impact on those issues through the courts. And that's one of the best ways for us to prepare for uncertainty, whatever the outcome for next year. And we do that by pushing Democrats in the Senate to confirm as many federal judges as possible, so that if we do have a new administration, there will be more judges in place who are committed to civil rights, to the rule of law, to equal justice, more judges who actually care about ethics and being impartial. The total number doesn't matter, right? The more judges that we confirm this year really is important, but just as important is the quality of those judges and the backgrounds and the perspectives that they bring. For decades, the federal bench has been comprised mainly of white men with from private practice or with corporate backgrounds, and it's also no secret that the far right has, taken this a step further and put extreme right-wing partisans on the bench. So what we need are fair and impartial judges on the bench who are committed to things like equal justice for all people. We need judges who will bring deep experience on things like civil rights, labor, public defense. In other words, we need judges on the bench who look like us and reflect our rich diversity. I think our coalition has had a lot of success over the last 3 years. We are seeing a record number of women, people of color, LGBTQ plus people, and people with disabilities on the bench. Under the Biden administration these past 3 years, more than 60% of judges confirmed are women and more than 60% are people of color. Judges like Judge Nancy Abudu, a civil rights champion, and unwavering former advocate for voting rights, reproductive justice, gender justice, and the first Black woman to sit on the 11th Circuit, confirmed last year, May 26th of last year. So having fair and impartial judges that bring demographic and professional diversity to the bench is really important, because those are the experiences they're going to bring into their rulings. And that matters because we need judges who are committed to, again, justice for all people, not just the wealthy and the powerful few. And when our courts reflect our diversity, people also have more trust and confidence in the courts, and they understand, especially when they understand the real life implications of their decisions. Now, many of these judges have been on the bench for just a few years. In some cases, some, just literally were confirmed. But I think the thing to remember about the impact here is that when we're talking about lifetime appointments, these are judges that are going to be bringing these experiences and their perspectives into their rulings for potentially decades, which means for all those issues I mentioned earlier, this is the kind of perspective that is going to be, this is the kind of perspective we need moving forward, especially as the political landscape continues to change. So let me stop there, though. Go right back to you, Megan.
Amazing. Thanks so much, Angel. And I want to lift up, because I know we have some folks on the call from the Consumers Advocates group, and they specifically requested that I talk about why judges are important to consumers. And I want to flag that we're all consumers, but also AFJ does, or not AFJ, I used to work at AFJ, I'm so sorry. People for the American Way does a lot of reporting on how judges from this administration are impacting our lives. And I just wanted to flag there have been a couple of really great decisions for consumers just in the last couple of months. One of them had to do with like deceptive labeling on baby food, and a judge was like, no, you can't do that, which is amazing, right? We want to make sure the food we're buying for our babies is safe and well labeled. And another one was actually about allowing a lawsuit against Amazon to go forward, brought by consumers about their invasion of privacy. So I will link to those in the chat. But to Angel's amazing point about the kind of judges we need, I wanted to highlight National Women's Law Center put together a really amazing blog post on the diverse and like immensely qualified women who are being confirmed to our courts and how they're improving them. And so I just wanted to drop that link in the chat as well, because National Women's Law Center does such an amazing job at talking about these judges and about the impact they're having on our lives. And so I really wanted to make sure that we share that resource. And now I'm actually going to talk to you for a couple minutes about when a judge is going through this, when a judicial nominee is going through this process, right? What do we hear about them, right? When they go through, as Patrick mentioned, they all go through kind of a Senate Judiciary Committee hearing, right? And every Senate committee is made up of both Republicans and Democrats, right? So we're going to hear a lot about every nominee during that hearing process. And unfortunately, what we've seen is a lot of times we're hearing misinformation and disinformation coming out of these hearings. And we're hearing attacks on these nominees that are really unfounded and based more in kind of coded, often racist and sexist language than it is in reality, right? So we'll hear them attack women of color as unqualified. We're seeing this right now, kind of in the presidential race, right? There are folks who are coming out and claiming that even though she's the vice president, the Democratic nominee, Kamala Harris, is somehow unqualified to run for president, right? That's a common attack we see against women of color when they're running for or being promoted to positions of power, right? We'll see all sorts of attacks like this, right? The most important thing we can do is not repeat those attacks and lift up the truth about these nominees' records, right? Like, it can be really hard to hear things like this about a person that you think is cool or a person you think would be amazing for your community. And you hear these kind of like unfounded attacks or people like twisting their records and making things seem really terrible, right? When they did, you know, an amazing thing for their community, right? We had a judicial nominee who was, who had worked for years to help like make sure that people could have access to making their own healthcare decisions, especially around reproductive rights and abortion care, right? And that was twisted into some sort of like crazy, like, you know, terrible thing. And it can be really hard not to like, you know, just like quote tweet whatever thing you come across and be like, this isn't true, right? But even by quote tweeting that, you're giving that attack more eyeballs on it, and you're actually continuing to promote that attack, right? So instead, it's important to like stop and like take a breath and talk about the positive things about the nominee instead, right? If you see misinformation about something in their record, instead of retweeting or reposting or re-Xing, I don't know, the information, right? It's important to go ahead and take what's actually true and put that out there, right? Actually, this person has fought for reproductive justice and reproductive rights their whole career as an advocate, and now their role will be different as a judge, right? But it's clear they understand how the law impacts real people, right? So we want to make sure that when we hear these attacks, when we're, you know, going through these, we can read the records of these judges. We know that so many of the judges that are being put forward right now are amazing nominees who would make a real difference in our communities. So it's important that we get out there as the people who will benefit from these judges and talk about their records and talk to our friends and talk to our families about like, hey, this person is actually really amazing and they're gonna be an amazing judge and we need them in our community. And that we combat that disinformation and those attacks without repeating them, right? So like that's a little preview of like how to talk about judges. And I'm super excited. We're going to hear more from Naomi in a little bit about like how we talk to our communities about judges. So I don't want to get too far into that. But right now, we've talked a lot. We heard from Savante about how important it is that our senators hear from us. We heard from Patrick about the process And he identified a bunch of places where people can make their voices heard and reminded us that every senator talks about every judge. We heard from Angel about the kind of judges that are getting nominated and that we want on the bench. And now I'm super excited to bring up my friend Doug, who's going to talk to us about talking to our senators. I know I am a millennial. I hate making phone calls, but if there's one phone call I'm going to make, it's for a judge, right? Because we need these people. These people are going to be on the bench for the rest of their lives. So we need to make sure that we're getting the right people on the bench. So Doug, soothe my phone anxiety. Tell me what happens when I call my senator and why it's important that I do it.
Absolutely. Thank you, Meg, and thank you to People4 and AFJ for putting this together, and all the other panelists, all of you for being here. I want to start with a number, and I would like everyone to write this down. I will give it to you more than once. I'll put it in the chat, but I need you to write this down. The number is 202-224-3121. That is the number for the United States Capitol Switchboard. And when you call that number, you can tell them where you live, anywhere in the United States, not just where your state, but specifically where you live. And they can tell you who your senators are, your representative, and they can even connect you to them. And so that number is very important. Put that in your phone. That's the Capitol Switchboard. No matter where you live in the United States, it can connect you to your elected representatives in Congress, including your senators. And so just like we all need to vote, just like it's very important that we knock on doors and volunteer for other good causes and candidates we believe in, it's also really important that we call our senators and tell them to prioritize filling every vacancy on the federal bench with pro-environment, pro-democracy, pro-choice judges, or whatever your individual issue is. It doesn't have to be those three. You need to make sure your senators hear from you that they need to prioritize confirming those judges. This is really important because even the senators who we know are good on these issues, even the ones who we know, even if you think, oh, my senators are great, they vote for all the good judges, I trust them, they have good values, they have competing priorities, legitimate competing priorities that occupy their time and the Senate's time in session. And they need to hear from their constituents that this is a priority. And so what happens when you call your senator? First, when you call them, you are not going to speak to a United States senator personally when you make these calls. But that does make your job easier because you don't need to come up with a whole spiel about why you think this is important. I mean, if you want to tell them why you think it's important, that's fantastic. But the key thing when you call them is what happens is senators have a few dozen staff and they have some interns. So when you call their office, the person answering the phone is going to be either a very junior staffer or an intern. And that person's job when they talk to you is to write down, okay, X number of constituents called today and said that they wanted Senator Smith to do this or not do that or support this bill or that bill or whatever. And your job is to make the number of people who called that day and said confirm pro-environment, pro-democracy, pro-choice judges, you want that number to go up because that is what filters up to the senior staff of the senator and eventually to the senator himself or herself, and they will hear 100 people called today and they said they want us to prioritize confirming progressive judges. That means there's a constituency for this. People in my state care about it. I should spend my time doing this. I should talk to the Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer and tell him we should spend more time doing this. This is important. Our constituents care about it. It's what the people want. And that really does matter. It really, really does. It matters even if you think your senator is great. It matters even if you think your senator is not great. By the way, if they are great, you should say, we appreciate their great record on judges. And by the way, every Democratic senator has a pretty good record on judges. But when you call them, you want to say, you call that Capitol Switchboard, you told them where you live, they'll connect you to one of your senators. By the way, if you live in one of the 50 states, you have two senators. So you got to call twice, right? One for each senator. And you get to connect to their office. They will say, hello, this is Senator Smith's office. And you'll tell them your name and your zip code. It's important. You don't have to give them all the information in the world, but it is helpful if you give them your name and zip code, because then they know, okay, this is actually a constituent calling and not just a random person from some other state, because they care what their constituents think, who they represent. So you give them your name and your zip code. And if they have a good record on judges, if they're a progressive senator, you say, we appreciate Senator Smith's record on judges. And regardless, you say, we need them to prioritize filling every vacancy with progressive judges or with pro-environment judges or with pro-civil rights judges or with pro-choice judges or whatever your issue is, judges who believe in what you believe in. And you got to remind them we have a historic opportunity to confirm judges who will protect our rights for decades to come. This is such an important point for all of us to keep in mind. Federal judges serve for life. Some of them will be there 30, 40, even 50 years. Clarence Thomas has been on the bench for over 30 years, and it isn't just Supreme Court justices. All of these people serve for the rest of their lives. And so when we get these judges confirmed to these finite number of seats, we are making generational change. Even if you don't necessarily know what every individual judge is doing, it matters so much. And so getting them to prioritize this is what we do. The number is 202-224-3121. By the way, you can also look up your senator's website. If you type in their last name.senate.gov, right? I'm from New Hampshire, so if I type in Shaheen.senate.gov for Jean Shaheen or Hassan.senate.gov for Maggie Hassan, I can get their websites. And you can see their direct line for their Washington, D.C. office or their offices in the states. Those are good too. But that number, 202-224-3121, that is a number that will work for you no matter who your senators are anywhere in the country. It also works for your House members when you want to reach them, although judges are confirmed only by the Senate. It is really important to make these calls. They really do count. If we get a lot of people to call, it makes a difference. We actually, we know this. We hear from our friends on the Hill that it makes a difference. And so please do that. Please call them. And remember, also, the people you're talking to on the other end, they are interns or junior staff. So they are not the U.S. senator. They are not the one making the decision. Their job is to pass on the feedback. So please be nice to them. And also again, whether or not you like the senator, please be nice to the junior staff you're talking to. And it doesn't have to be a super long call. It can be a 30-second call. They just need to know what your name is, where you live, and why you're calling. That is the important thing. And the last thing I'll say before I repeat that number one more time is if you live in one of the 50 states, you have 2 senators, and we need you to call them both. I live in Washington, D.C. I don't get any senators. Please do this because I can't. Call your senators and tell them to confirm pro-environment, pro-democracy, pro-choice judges. And once again, the Capitol Switchboard number is 202-224-3121. Back to you, Meg.
So what I'm hearing is everyone on this call should call their senators twice to make up for the fact that Doug can't call senators because DC doesn't have any. So you should call those senators twice. And that number, again, one more time, Doug, what is it?
It is 202-224-3121. And by the way, after you call both your senators, give it 2 weeks and then call them again and say the same thing.
Yeah, because they're constantly keeping those numbers updated. I am gonna drop the link to League of Conservation Voters democracy work, which is where they do all of their kind of judges work and all of their voting rights work. And it's really amazing work. And so I really want to encourage you to check it out. And remember that like these courts get to make decisions on environmental laws too, right? Like they're making decisions on literally everything. And we often see it at the Supreme Court level, but the Supreme Court only actually hears about 1% of the cases that are appealed to the Supreme Court every year, which means the rest of those cases, the rest of those thousands of cases that are happening at the courts level every year are actually happening at the lower court level, which is these very judges that we're talking about right now. So I just wanted to flag that. And also I wanted to flag that. So we've fully established on this call that I am a nerd about judicial nominations and calling your senator. I feel like we're all on the same page with that. So I just wanted to flag that we actually, and you don't have to buy this, it's just a great resource. And I couldn't figure out how to put a picture in the chat, but we actually have a t-shirt that has a sample call script on the back. So if you just want to take a picture of that and like save it in your phone, you'll always know exactly what to say when you call your senator. And if you want to be a nerd, you can also buy the t-shirt, but really I just want you to save that photo so that you always have a call script like saved in your phone. Cool? Cool. So next, I am going to bring up, because it's not just about calling our senators, right? We can also meet with our senators. That's their job, right? Is to hear from us and do the things we want them to do. And so Darcy and the National Council of Jewish Women, having both the National Women's Law Center and the National Council of Jewish Women on the call has been throwing me for a loop. But the National Council of Jewish Women has done such an amazing job of like turning out their folks and meeting with senators, and they are experts on this. So I'm super excited to turn it over to Darcy so she can talk to you about how to meet with your senator.
Thank you so much, Meg. And the national women's groups are well represented on this call, which is amazing. So for those of you who don't know, the National Council of Jewish Women is the oldest Jewish feminist civil rights organization working for equity and justice for women, children, and families. We're a proud member of the Fair Courts Coalition with all of the folks on this call and support our local Courts Matter coalitions around the country. So it is August, and as Mike mentioned earlier on the call, this is the perfect time to meet with your senators in district. They are all home on recess for the month of August. They are campaigning, they are meeting with constituents, they are relaxing. If they do relax. So this is a really great time for you to build a relationship with your senator and with their office locally. So how to meet with your senator. First, look up where they have district offices. They have district offices throughout your state. They're regional, so look up both your senators online, just type in their name and you'll go to their website and you can look up where their local offices are and you can find which regional office may be close to your home. Then you will find the email address on their website and you can call their office or you can send them an email requesting a meeting. Say you're a constituent and what you would like to meet about. And so once the meeting is scheduled, before the meeting, you should research your senator's positions on the issues that you're meeting about. So a fair, independent, and diverse judiciary. Find out if they're on the Judiciary Committee. Maybe they have an extra role there where they're going to be voting to move forward some of the nominees that we're all advocating for. But even if they're not on the Judiciary Committee, of course, they should be prioritized expediting judicial nominees as quickly as possible because every senator votes for every nominee when they move to the Senate floor. So when you meet with your senator, the first things first, similar to the phone call, you are likely not to meet with your actual senator. You are likely going to meet with a member of their legislative or district staff. Do not be disappointed. These staff have the ear of your senator and in many cases, maybe the expert on the issue that you're meeting with them about. So please treat them nicely and respectfully and you can convey your ask to them and they will then raise it with your senator. So please don't be disappointed. First, when you meet, identify yourself as a constituent and then talk about why a fair, independent, and diverse judiciary is important to you. Personal stories and clear examples are always helpful to paint a picture and also make the discussion more memorable for the staffer or senator that you're meeting with. And make your ask, be very clear. Tell your senator to prioritize confirming judicial nominees during the remainder of this Congress and why it's so important to you. If you know of a district court or a circuit court judge in your circuit or your district that you can name and would like to advocate for specifically, that would be very important to do so. And if the senator or the staffer has questions, answer to the best of your ability. If you don't have an answer, you can tell them that you'll check on it and circle back, and you can reach out to any of us on this call for more information about the questions they may be asking. And then following the meeting, follow up, send them an email reiterating your ask and answering any questions that may have been asked during the meeting. Those are the top tips for meeting with your senator, and turning it back over to you, Meg.
Amazing. Thank you so much. I personally have gotten the chance to go to like a couple of NCJW's trainings, usually to like speak. But I have learned so much going to their trainings and like highly suggest checking out their resources. I'm actually going to drop their Courts Matter toolkit. Nope, that's the wrong link. I'm going to drop their Courts Matter toolkit in the chat, which has information on the nominees that are currently pending, and all sorts of stuff. So I wanted to make sure folks have that. And now I am super excited to talk to Naomi from the People's Parity Project to talk about how we talk to our communities about judges. Speaking of going to trainings and talking about judges, like it is, there's a lot happening. in the world right now, Naomi. Like, we know this. There's so much going on. It can sometimes feel like hard to convince people that like, no, really, judges are what like deserves your attention right now. So like, how do we do that? Like, how do we talk to like, I know my mom's in Texas, right? And she's more concerned with like making sure she can pay her mortgage and like feed her dog than she is like with, she loves that dog, I think more than me, but like, she's way more concerned about like what's directly going on in her life. And sometimes it can feel hard to like convince her like, no, 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 but I need you to call Ted Cruz and like talk to him about judges, even though we know how that's going to go, right? But like, how do you do that? How do you have those conversations?
Yeah, so I think it's really important to really stress the idea or the fact that judges wield a significant amount of power, making decisions that directly impact our lives, anything from like affirmative actions and reproductive rights to LGBTQ rights and workers' rights. Like these issues are shaped by judicial rulings, and when we face setbacks like in these areas is often due to like bad judges, and this isn't an abstract concept. Like it affects us all directly. To engage your base, I think it's like really important to like share personal stories and real life experiences. When people see judicial decisions affect their daily lives, they become more invested. As with any sort of like political organization, it's important to clearly explain the stakes in real life terms. We're not doing something like new. It's something like that we're doing is like really emphasizing the power that judges hold it. And like, especially as the right wing gains more influence, it's really easy for people to feel intimidated in talking about judges or the courts. So we'll remind them it's like very similar to advocacy and organizing. These are political actors who make decisions that impact our lives. So we should talk to them as such. Encourage your community to think about times when court decisions impacted them and their loved ones. Stories are a way to convey the importance of people's stakes in fair courts. One way I would do this is by sharing like my own personal stakes. As a woman, when Roe v. Wade was overturned, I and like other women lost access to life-changing medical procedures, along with like medical privacy that has long been considered a fundamental right. Talking about these real impacts of judicial decision makings and the consequences of having judges on the bench who don't care about us as people motivates people to take necessary steps to like create change. Sharing stories helps others see the tangible consequences and why it's like so crucial to pay attention who is being elected as judges. I think like highlighting the losses we face due to bad judges, setbacks like affirmative actions, attacks on the rights of workers to unionize and build lives with dignities like women reproductive rights, LGBTQ rights, and the bad decisions that like in recent years people might have heard of, but aren't isolated incidents on part of like a broader trend with collective action. A broader trend that we can reverse with collective action. I would also say, like, on the flip side, it's so important to share the stories of judges who matter. Like, let's not like all just pile up on the negative. Having examples of judges who stood up for voting rights or consumer rights or the environment can really help show people that it's like important not just to fight against the nomination of bad judges, but also to like affirmatively support good judges. Like, for example, like Nicole Berner, who is a longtime labor lawyer who dedicated her career to standing up for working rights. Thanks to the advocacy of many of the folks on this call, actually, Nicole was nominated as a judge in the Fourth Circuit, issuing like opinions that have the power to build more than just like this country for workers. I would say like another example, which was like really recent as of yesterday, Amit Mehta, I'm sorry, issued a landmarking decision finding that Google has violated antitrust laws. These types of decisions, keeping corporate power in check and defending the rights of workers and consumers, don't just happen. They come to pass because people have actively fought for pro-people judges. Telling these stories, like sharing these victories, they're going to make a difference between electing a good judge and, making sure that the importance of these stories and the harm they've caused or the good they cause is really shared. I think like when you urge your network to prioritize judicial issues, talk to your friends, talk to your families, like talk to community members about the importance of judges. Justice delayed is like, as we say, justice denied. And we need to mobilize people to pressure their elected officials to fill these vacancies with judges who are for the people. I think it's really important to like put out there that by raising awareness and sharing our stories, getting people to notice that they have a stake in the judicial system is going to be paramount to pushing the types of things that we want. And we can ensure a system that reflects justice and fairness, and we can also work together to make a difference.
Absolutely.
I'll pass it over to you.
Yeah, sorry. Thank you so much, Naomi. And I want to lift up People's Parity Project. So People's Parity Project organizes law students and attorneys to actually like advocate for fair courts. They're a really amazing organization. They do such a good job at like talking about the courts. And I pick on our lawyers all the time because sometimes they talk like lawyers and not like real people. But People's Parity Project does a really good job of, even though you're organizing lawyers, like you talk about the courts in a way that's like really easy to understand. And I love that about y'all. But thank you so much for being here. And I wanted to lift up, so I know we're not talking about Supreme Court reform today, but there was just news yesterday about more unreported gifts and vacations and things taken by Supreme Court justices. So, and speaking about workers' rights, or picking up on Naomi's point about workers' rights, I wanted to lift up People's Parity's report on court reform and the benefit it would have for workers. So I just put that in the chat because I was reading it when it came out in June and I want everyone else to read it. So thank you so much, Naomi. And I'm super excited. Speaking about what we can do, right, as just like normal people. So we've called our senators, hopefully. We've met with our senators. And now we're going to talk about the power of social media, which is my favorite thing as a digital organizer. So I'm super excited to welcome Dianita from Stand Up America. Stand Up America has been absolutely just like killing it on social media, talking about the Supreme Court, talking about judges. And so I'm super excited to have her here today to talk about like how we use this amazing platform and this amazing tool to do more than like get good recipes and like share photos of our dogs, which is primarily what I use it for, but it can also be such a powerful tool for change. So Dianita, I need water. I'm so sorry. Dianita, can you tell us a little bit more about how we can use social media to move our senators on these important judges?
Yes, of course. Thank you, Meg. Please go have a sip of water. So yeah, thank you so much for introducing me. Yes, I'm Dianita Ramesh. I'm the social media director at Stand Up America. And I started working here last year, but I've been working in digital and social for about 10 years now. And yeah, social media is a great way to keep the pressure up on issues that we want to see change on and make progress. And so just kind of starting really broadly from there, I think it's really important to sort of ask yourself a couple of questions when you are putting together whatever content it is on social media. I think it's really important to be able to answer these questions. So like the first one is like, who am I talking to? Who is this content for? Who's my audience? The next thing is defining your goals, what you're trying to achieve. Is it tied to a CTA or is it just content that's, trying to spread awareness and information? Why is it important? Why should people care? And I think the last two are really important. It's how do I explain this issue in a way that's super direct, conversational, clear, concise, and accurate? And lastly, I think, it's good to ask, is there an angle or perspective that I can provide to make an issue relatable or personable? And so when I'm putting together content of all kinds, like Meg said, we do a lot on the Supreme Court. Clarence Thomas is always keeping us on our toes, but we try to make sure we answer these questions when we're putting together things to make sure that it's going to actually reach people, it's going to actually drive them to take action. And so I think the way you can use social to get judges confirmed is basically every topic that has been covered already would make great social media content. I think first and foremost, it's important to define terms for your audience, like what is a fair court? What are districts? What are federal judges? How long are people on the bench for? It's important to get everyone on the same page, kind of starting from the same place so that, you know, we're all understanding, there's no ambiguity or just like misunderstanding about, you know, what it is we're trying to do. And so part of the job here is like really incorporating civics education to get people to take action. And then I think it's really important to be really specific and clear about why you're fighting for fair courts, how it's actually going to improve people's lives and strengthen our democracy, and why these judges matter for our everyday lives. It can be hard to see, but I think this is where like using examples, I think, is really, really important. The next is, I think, covering the confirmation process. How does the confirmation process work? How is calling your senator part of the process? And it sort of shows people that they have a role in this overall process to seeing a judge confirmed, and that a single, you know, an individual can make an impact. And this is where I think it's really important to share, you know, kind of like Naomi was just saying, like stories about why you're personally invested, like what are the stakes for you personally, you know, just to make it even more relatable and understandable to your audiences on social. And then it is really important to bring people's attention to the type of judges that are extreme and far right that are trying to get confirmed, and what the, you know, potential implications and consequences of that could be. So it's good to highlight that, just to show, you know, this is what the other side is trying to do. This is their very different vision for our country. And on the contrasting side, definitely highlighting the good judges, the ones we want confirmed, their backgrounds, the diversity they bring, their records, and how they're going to help the community and advance progressive causes. So I think, just for the sake of time, I know we're running late, I put together a doc with some ideas and some tips for each platform, and included links to different examples of like stand-up socials. Again, we've done a lot more on like Supreme Court sort of reform on our socials, so the examples are mainly going to reflect that. But I think, I hope that they provide some sort of inspiration for you when you're creating your socials, to drive people to take action and create better and fair courts for everyone. So I think I'll stop there and pass it back to Meg.
All right, thank you so much, Dayanita. So while I am asking all of my panelists to hop back on camera, I want everyone to find the raise hand button. And if you feel like you are more prepared now to take action on judges than before, raise your hand. We can do ours in person. Yeah, look at all those hands. Amazing. Guys, I'm so excited for you to get in this fight. It's so much fun. And it like makes such a huge difference. You can put them down whenever you want. But I love seeing all of those. Thank you for doing that. It makes such a difference in people's lives, because like each of these judges, I was putting together like a map of how many people are in each district, right? And there are like millions of people in each judicial district. So like each judge actually makes a decision that impacts millions of people probably every day. And like that's wild to think about. But we get to make our voices heard on each of those, which is super cool. So there were a couple questions in the chat. I got a little excited and answered some of them in chat, but I'm going to ask them again to you all so that we can answer them for everyone. One of the questions that I thought was important to lift up is, does it matter if there's not a judicial nominee in your state? Can you still call? Should you still call? Should you still take action? And Doug, I'm going to toss it to you first, since you are our expert on calling your senator.
I'm sorry, it's if the senator is someone who is not always great on our
No,
issues?
if there's a judicial nominee, but they're not in your state.
Got it. Yes, still very important to be calling your senator. Always very important. Every senator votes on every judge for every seat on the federal bench in the whole country. Always important. And also, you don't even need to know who the senators, who the judicial nominees are. You can literally just call your senator and say, prioritize confirming pro-environment judges or pro-democracy choices judges or pro-choice judges, whatever your issue is, and that's enough. You don't need to know who they are. You don't need details. That is plenty.
Yeah, absolutely. Anyone else want to weigh in on that? I will say the same thing applies on social. You don't have to know a specific Jewish nominee. You can just say, I want you to like take action, or I want fair-minded judges, and like tag your senators. Somebody monitors those tags. It's not, I would say on the priority list, call then social, even though I am a social person, but they're both super important for different reasons. Looking see if there are any other questions, but we are running over time. So since I don't see any more questions, I am going to go ahead and say thank you to our amazing panelists. Again, we will circulate all the amazing resources and information they shared in a kind of a wrap-up email. Thank you all so much for being here and for engaging in this training with us. Panelists, any final words of wisdom for our attendees before we close out?
Don't just do this stuff once. Do it routinely.
Yes, absolutely. And Doug, what was that number again?
202-224-3121.
Perfect. All right, everyone, go call your senators. They count voicemails too. So it may be 4 o'clock. They may not be in the office anymore because they work weird hours, but go call your senators. Have an amazing rest of your day. And panelists, thank you so much for being here. All right, everybody. Bye. Have a good one.
Thanks, everyone.